What would you do if you heard your best friend screaming for help in the woods at night, only to find them fast asleep right next to you? That happened to me in the screaming woods of Pluckley, and what I heard after still follows me to this day. Back in 2019, I was living in Kent. My best friend Dan was a bit of a thrill seeker. He'd heard about Pluckley, the most haunted village in England, and the Deering Woods nearby, better known by locals as the Screaming Woods. The stories are infamous. People say if you spend the night there, you'll hear the screams of villagers executed centuries ago, or lost wanderers who never came back out. We decided to test it, just the two of us, a couple sleeping bags and a tent pitched up on a muddy clearing deep in the trees. It was late October, damp and cold, the kind of night where fog hugs the branches. At first it was just silence, dead silence, no owls, no wind, no rustling leaves, the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. Around midnight, I must have drifted off. The next thing I knew, I was wide awake, heart pounding. Dan's voice, it was distant at first, but clear, a blood-curdling scream, my name tearing through the trees. Help, please. I shot upright in my sleeping bag, adrenaline surging. My first thought was that he's gone out to take a piss and something had happened. I grabbed my torch, unzipped the tent and yelled back. No reply, just another scream, closer this time, ragged, panicked. Help me! I ran a few feet into the clearing, lights swinging over trees that all looked the same. The sound was moving deeper into the woods. That's when I turned back to grab my phone and froze. Dan was still inside the tent, fast asleep. I shook him awake, panicked, shouting, "Mate, what the hell? Were you out there?" He blinked at me groggy, confused. "What are you on about? I've been asleep." Before I could answer, the scream came again, louder, clearer, Dan's voice. He went pale. We both knew it sounded exactly like him. We sat in the tent, the lights off, holding our breath. And then the voices started to change. It wasn't just one scream anymore. It was dozens, men, women, children, all screaming, calling for help, shrieking in agony. Some sounded like they were being burned alive, others like they were choking. And then, layered through all of it, came a sound that froze my blood. Laughter, low, guttural laughter, echoing between the screams. We wanted to run, but we didn't know where. Then came the footsteps, slow, crunching across the wet leaves just outside our tent. I killed the torch. We sat in the pitch black, listening at someone or something circling the tent. The footsteps stopped right by the door, and then, in Dan's voice, perfectly clear, "Let me in." Dan's hand clamped onto mine. He whispered, "Don't move." The zipper rattled like invisible fingers were tugging at it. We held it shut from the inside, shaking, praying it wouldn't open. And then, as suddenly as it started, the sound stopped. The woods went silent again. We didn't sleep. We just sat there till sunrise, listening, waiting for it to come back. When light finally cut through the trees, we packed our gear and bolted. On the way out, we passed another clearing. Every tree around it was carved with names, dozens, maybe hundreds of names, some fresh, some faded, all gouged deep into the bark. The last one stopped me cold. My name, carved into a tree that looked freshly cut. I hadn't been there before, neither had Dan. To this day, I don't know what we heard in those woods. Maybe it was echoes of the past, maybe it was something older, something that uses voices to lure people deeper until they never come out. All I know is that every so often, Even back home in my flat, I wake up around midnight and hear it again. Dan's voice outside my window, screaming my name. They say if you hear 3 knocks from the Black Abbot in Prestbury, it means death is coming to your door. I didn't believe the story until the night I heard those knocks for myself. In 2020, I rented a small cottage in Prestbury, Gloucestershire. If you've never heard of it, Prestbury is often called the most haunted village in Britain. Nearly every building has some kind of ghost story attached. The locals love to talk about the Black Abbot, a hooded monk who appears at night near the old church. Some say he's a harmless apparition. Others say if he visits your home, it's a sign someone inside is marked for death. I thought it was folklore, just pub talk. The cottage I rented was old, damp, with warped floorboards and a heavy wooden front door, the kind where every knock echoes like it's inside the house. The first time it happened, it was around 2:30 AM. 3 knocks, slow, heavy. I sat up in bed, heart hammering. At first, I thought it was a drunk or maybe kids messing around. But when I checked through the curtains, the street was empty. I unlocked the door, stepped out into the cold night, and swept my torch around the lane. Nothing, just silence. I told myself it was the house settling, but the next night, it happened again. 3 knocks, louder. This time, I froze. I didn't open the door, I just listened as the sound echoed through the walls, reverberating like it came from everywhere at once. And then, faintly, I heard something else. A voice, whispering, Latin words I couldn't understand, muttered like a prayer. By the 3rd night, I was on edge, barely sleeping, waiting for it to happen. And right on cue, 2:17 AM, 3 deafening knocks, so hard the frame rattled. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the little security camera I set above the door. What I saw made my blood run cold. There was a figure standing there, tall, hooded, black robes like they seemed to soak up the light. His head was bowed, face hidden. He just stood there, perfectly still, right outside my door. As I watched, his head lifted slowly, and though the hood shadowed his face, I could feel his eyes locked on mine. The knocks came again, louder than ever. Boom, boom, boom. I staggered back from the door. My phone slipped from my hands, screen shattering. The whispering grew louder, not from outside, but inside the cottage. The voice was in the walls, muttering prayers in a language I couldn't understand. The temperature dropped so fast my breath pawned white. And then, silence. I thought it was over, but then the sound came of wood splintering. From the hallway, the old crucifix I hung on the wall fell and cracked clean in half. The next day, I went straight to the landlord. Shaking, I told him what happened. His face went pale. He muttered, "Not again." When I pressed him, he finally admitted something. His own father had rented the same cottage years earlier. He heard the same knocks, 3 nights in a row. On the 4th night, he dropped dead in his bed. The landlord had never told anyone because he didn't think anyone would believe him. I moved out that week, but I'd never forgotten those knocks because sometimes, late at night, even in my new flat miles away, I wake up to that sound again. 3 slow, deliberate knocks, and every time I lay there frozen, praying I don't hear the whispering that comes after. What would you do if you saw a man in a plague doctor's mask watching you in a village, and then saw him again outside your own house that night? That happened to me when I visited Eyam, the plague village, and he's the reason I'll never go back. In 2021, I took a solo trip through Derbyshire. I'm into history and Eyam had been on my list for years. If you don't know, Eyam is infamous for what happened in 1665. When the plague hit, the villagers voluntarily quarantined themselves so it wouldn't spread. Almost the entire village died, over 260 people buried in shallow graves around the parish. It's beautiful now, but it carries a heaviness, like the whole place remembers. I parked near the museum and spent the day walking the boundary stones where food and coins used to be exchanged. The air was damp, heavy, the kind of quiet that feels wrong for a village. Late in the afternoon, I stepped at a stone bridge on the edge of the village. I was taking photos of the moss-covered stones when I noticed movement on the hill. A man, standing perfectly still. He was dressed in black robes, long and heavy despite the mild weather, and his face, hidden behind a white plague doctor's mask. You know, the kind with that long, hooked beak. At first I thought it was a reenactor, maybe some tourist stunt, but he didn't move, didn't wave, he just stood there, watching. When I lifted my phone to take a photo, the screen glitched, flickered into static, then went black. By the time it came back, he was gone. I shook it off and drove home that evening. My flat was 2 hours away in a completely different county. I parked, grabbed my bag and walked up to my door. That's when I froze. Across the street, under the dim glow of a street lamp, stood the same man, black cloak, white mask, watching me. I tried to rationalize, maybe my eyes were tired, maybe it was a trick of the light, but when I unlocked my door and looked again, he was closer, halfway across the road. I bolted inside, slammed the door and locked it. Every instinct told me not to look out the window, but I couldn't resist. He was standing directly across from my window, head tilted upwards, mask angled towards me. I yanked the curtains shut, heart pounding. That's when my phone buzzed. A new photo in my gallery. My breath caught. It was me, standing in the window, taken from the street. I hadn't taken it. For hours, I sat frozen, every light in the flat blazing, phone clutched in my hand. Around 3 AM, I finally dozed off on the couch. When I woke, daylight was streaming in. I cautiously checked outside. Empty, no trace of anyone. I tried to show friends the photo, but when I pulled it up, it was gone. Just a black square where the image should have been. I haven't been back to Eyam. I deleted every photo from that trip. But sometimes, when I scroll my phone at night, I'll catch a flicker of static across the screen, just for a second. And once, only once, I swear I saw that photo again. Me, in the window, and in the corner of the frame, closer than before, the pale beaked mask of the plague watcher. They say you can still hear church bells ringing beneath the waves at Dunwich, the ghost of a drowned city. I heard them myself, and worse, I think they were tolling for me. In the summer of 2018, I took a solo camping trip to Suffolk. I'd read about Dunwich, once a thriving medieval port town before the sea swallowed it whole. What's left today is just a small village, but locals call it Britain's Atlantis. The ruins of churches, houses, even cemeteries, they're all gone, pulled under the tide centuries ago. Some nights, people claim you can hear the bells of the drowned churches still ringing beneath the waves. I didn't believe it, but I wanted to see the coast. I pitched my tent on the cliffs just outside the village, overlooking the dark expanse of the North Sea. Wind battered the canvas and gulls wheeled overhead. It was lonely, but I liked it that way. Around midnight, I stepped outside to smoke. The tide was far out, the moon hanging over the water. That's when I heard it, a low, muffled bong, then another, Bells, dull, heavy, echoing from under the sea. I froze. The sound was faint but rhythmic, carrying up from the black water. It wasn't a buoy or a ship's bell. It was deeper, older. I listened for nearly 5 minutes as the bell tolled into a slow, steady rhythm before fading into silence. When I finally crawled back into my tent, my skin prickled with unease. Sometime in the night, I woke to this damp chill. Water was seeping under my tent. At first I thought the tide had come in, but when I checked outside, the ground was dry, only under my tent was wet, the grass slick as if it had rained in just one patch. Then I noticed the smell, salt water, viney and sour. The bell started again, louder this time. Bong, bong, bong. And then came the voice, a man's voice, low and hoarse, whispering my name from outside the tent. I sat frozen, heart slamming, as footsteps squelched in the wet grass. A shadow passed across the canvas. Then the zipper slowly pulled down, inch by inch. I grabbed my torch and I shone it through the gap. A figure stood there, tall, robed, soaked through as if he just walked out of the sea. His hood was pulled low, but water seemed from his sleeves. In one hand, he held a lantern glowing faintly yellow. In the other, a wooden cross. His lips moved, whispering a prayer I couldn't understand. Then he looked straight at me and said my name. "Your grave is ready." I scrambled back, shaking, as he pressed a dripping hand against the tent wall. Salt water seeped through the fabric, staining it dark. And then he was gone. The bell stopped. The night went silent again. At dawn, I stumbled out, exhausted and terrified. The ground outside my tent was dry, no footprints, no puddles. But when I checked the cliff's edge, I saw something carved into the soil, a wooden cross, half buried, weathered with age. On it, a name, my name. I left Dunwich this morning and never looked back, but sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I hear bells tolling in the distance, faint, muffled, like they're underwater, and every time, I wonder if they're still ringing for me, waiting for the tide to take me under.